London. Few Palestinians expect Israel to heed the UN's call for maximum restraint, but even the threat of a rising death toll is unlikely to halt further protests in Gaza. The political horizons for Gaza's almost 2 million inhabitants are severely constrained by an Israeli-Egyptian blockade, a divided leadership, and a lack of concrete action either regionally or internationally toward peace. Washington has yet to present any detailed peace plan, and many Palestinians believe all they can do is try to make sure they are not forgotten amid the carnage caused by other regional conflicts, including Syria and Yemen. Yahya Abu Daka, a 20-year-old student, said he had come to demonstrate and honor those killed in the past. "Yes, there is fear," he told AP. "We are here to tell the occupation that we are not weak." Meanwhile, Hazem Qassem, the Hamas spokesman, emphasized that demonstrations would be peaceful, maintaining the peaceful nature of the protests will strike all fragile Zionist propaganda, he said. The March of Return protests on the Gaza-Israeli border, organized by a network of Palestinian activists, are intended to draw attention to refugees displaced in 1948 by the creation of Israel. Refugees make up more than 90% of Gaza's population, and the protests will culminate on May 15, the 70th anniversary of Israel's birth and a day the Palestinians call the Nakba, or catastrophe. This year the anniversary will prove especially stark for Palestinians because the administration of President Donald Trump is scheduled to open a U.S. embassy in Jerusalem. Israel annexed East Jerusalem, which the Palestinians want as their capital in a future state, after the 1967 war, in a move that is not recognized under international law. Many Gazans believe they have little to lose. Unemployment is around 50%, healthcare is meager, and the blockade has turned the territory into an open-air prison. A decade of Hamas rule has failed to improve the lives of ordinary Gazans. The divide between Hamas and the Fatah party led by Mahmoud Abbas has worsened, while the Palestinian president has found himself marginalized by Washington in spite of his previous overtures. The humanitarian situation is set to deteriorate even further as Trump withholds aid payments to the Palestinians, accusing them of unwillingness to discuss peace with Israel. The U.S. is by far the largest donor to UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. Many Gazans barely remember a brief window of hope in 2005 when Israel withdrew its troops and settlers from the territory. For a short time, there was talk of economic regeneration backed by the World Bank and other organizations. All that faded, particularly after Hamas won parliamentary elections in 2006, and the international community backed Israel by refusing any contact with the Islamist organization. Israel and Hamas militants have fought 3 wars since 2008. With Washington's apparent abandonment of a two-state solution that would be acceptable to most Palestinians, another war cannot be ruled out. Syrian troops begin new offensive on rebel-held areas outside Damascus as truce collapses. New wave of violence leaves at least 36 people dead, including women and children. Jeddah, even as President Donald Trump hints at a U.S. pullout from Syria, insisting that Daesh is almost completely defeated, the terrorist group is showing signs of a revival. After being forced out of the main towns they once occupied near the Iraqi border, the militants have regrouped elsewhere and revised their tactics, recently mounting a brazen attack on a border city in eastern Syria and expanding their footprint inside the Syrian capital itself. Yahya al-Aridi, the Syrian opposition spokesman, told Arab News that the Kurds had been taken hostage by Kurdish groups including PKK, Kurdistan Workers' Party, and PYD, Democratic Union Party, but were also victims of those with interests in the region, US, Russia, Turkey, Iran, and the regime of Bashar Assad. He said, they were used by the US at a certain point, and when the US threatened to pull out its forces, they got worried because somebody out there would fill the vacuum. Their fears are justified. The plight of Kurds had been heightened because after years of suffering, they thought the U.S. had come to their rescue, al-Aridi said. The U.S. had its own interests, and if the U.S. and its allies have to fight any party, they have to fight Assad's state terrorism. Meanwhile, Syrian troops began a ground offensive under cover of airstrikes on rebel-held areas outside Damascus on Friday after a 10-day truce collapsed following a dispute over evacuation of opposition fighters. The new wave of violence left at least 36 people dead, including women and children, according to state media and opposition activists. By sunset on Friday, artillery pieces, multiple rocket launchers and warplanes had pounded the city of Douma, which is home to tens of thousands of people. Live television footage showed thick smoke rising above sections of the city after intense airstrikes.